So I want to go ahead and introduce our presenters today. My name is Sandy Borchert. I am on the marketing team here at Guide Technologies, and with us today we have our speakers, Ron Klontz, and he is our VP of Sales Consulting, and we have John Sebek, who is the Partner Account Manager at Prophix. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John. Thanks, John.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sandy. Hi, everyone. Here's the agenda that's really going to take us into the next 30 to 40 minutes or so. We're going to kick things off by talking about challenges facing finance teams. We're going to dive into CloudSuite Industrial, SyteLine, and AEX, and how that is a nice complement to Prophix. And then we'll dive into a hands-on demo where we're actually going to go ahead and talk about harnessing all that data that resides within your ERP systems, and being able to go ahead and bring that into Prophix to leverage it for dashboarding, reporting purposes, planning and forecasting, along with consolidation. So if you have a multi-entity structure, you might be dealing in different currencies, you might have to take into consideration eliminations. That all could be done directly within Prophix as well. And then once again, we'll go ahead and open up to a Q&A session. So with regards to the current state, for a lot of organizations out there, I'm sure you've had your fair share of pains and challenges over the past 5 years or so. Going back to 2019, a lot of our customers were dealing with supply shortages. They were dealing with issues procuring product. And then fast forward a couple of years was the labor crisis. And now, if you think about it, every time you go ahead and turn on your TV, there's all these different talks around tariffs, which means managing and operating in a business is extremely challenging these days. And that actually becomes even more difficult for those organizations that are doing all of their reporting and analytics and planning in the Excel environment. For a lot of organizations, just doing reporting takes an extremely long time to do. And that's really what we hear from a lot of our customers at the end of the day. That also leads to having issues with respect to not having a single source of information. The actual process itself tends to be one that's manual in nature, having to go ahead and extract all those data sets from those core systems, having to drop it into Excel, creating reports, so formatting. And then if there's any analysis that they want to do, it's running pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, and formulas. That has led to a lot of our customers and prospects telling us that it's put a big strain on their FP&A team. So a lot of organizations leverage, or a lot of departments within organizations leverage the FP&A team when it comes to doing analysis. And as a result, a lot of them feel that strain at the end of the day. In addition to that, if organizations are leveraging Excel for reporting and analytics, it doesn't lend itself to great collaboration. It's not great from an accountability standpoint. And in addition to that, a lot of customers tend to have issues as it relates to accuracy as well. And then that really boils down to executives not having a complete picture of past, present, and future. And when you think of the actual negative business outcomes, those can actually be rather significant if an organization can't really trust their data at the end of the day. So what we hear, once again, is really that leads to inefficient use of time, inaccuracies with respect to the data. From an analytical standpoint, it's not easy to identify over or underspends, along with which products are profitable. So if you think about it from a margin standpoint. And then on top of that, if you factor in variables that are susceptible to change, such as commodity pricing, interest rates, nowadays tariffs, it really can potentially lead to misguided decision making. To paint the picture for everybody here, for those that don't have a corporate performance management solution in place, and if you're doing all of your reporting and analysis in Excel, this visual lends itself well to sort of painting that picture here. So you're probably pulling in data from a couple core systems. This could be SyteLine, it could be CloudSuite Industrial. You're pulling that information into your Excel workbooks. You're leveraging that from a planning and reporting standpoint. You might have a couple individuals that are involved with the reporting or planning process. But what tends to happen for a lot of organizations is as they grow over time, and this could be done organically, it could be done by means of acquisition, what we find is that additional core systems tend to get added within the organization. Additional stakeholders also take part in those core activities. And what was once manageable at one point in time tends to break down. And that's really where Prophix now comes into play, because what we do is we tap directly into your source systems. We pull that information into a model within Prophix where we would actually go ahead and build out your business logic. And now by doing so, everything resides within one central location. So you could do all of your reporting, all of your forecasting. You could harness the information to actually create dashboards, which are actually fully interactive. And at the end of the day, you have one central source for all of your data. I love showing this little visual. It really provides a great idea of how a system such as SyteLine or CloudSuite Industrial should coexist with a tool like Prophix. When you think about it, sort of going left to right on the slide, when you think about hindsight, that's essentially exactly what your ERP system has been designed to do. It's tracking all of your transactional level information. And that could be, by the minute, it could be hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. And what organizations tend to do is leverage the information within their ERP system to provide them insights. And insights, if you want to think about it, is essentially the reporting that you do, which is in a lot of cases static. So a lot of ERP systems have very rudimentary reporting capabilities. But where there tends to be a large gap pertains to the foresight or the forward-looking lens. And that's really where Prophix comes into play to fill that void. So we integrate directly into your ERP product. We would go ahead and schedule the cadence of the import. So you could go ahead and refresh it as often as you would like. And by doing so, now all of your information actually resides directly within Prophix. So you can actually go ahead and do all of your reporting out of Prophix, but better yet, you can actually go ahead and take a look at your organization through that forward-looking lens to actually go ahead and do forecasting and play around with different levers and model out different scenarios. So a number of our customers leverage Prophix not only to do their annual budget, but to do a monthly reforecast. You could do rolling forecasts. You could even do all of your long-range planning as well. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn the next couple slides over to my buddy Ron here. I think you're on mute, Ron. We don't have audio.
How about now?
There we go.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where everyone is at. So with CloudSuite Industrial and Prophix, Prophix has been successfully implemented in CloudSuite Industrial SyteLine for on-prem, CloudSuite Industrial for V10 in the cloud, the Infor XA platform, the visual platform. So what all these ERP platforms have in common is they have embedded, or what I would call basic standard financial reporting. And CloudSuite Industrial is one I'm kind of highlighting here for those folks here that from the SyteLine environment. That's what I implemented some 30 years ago when I came out of a CPA firm. And really, we started with the back in the day, it was a financial statement report writer where you had to go in and define your lines and you do all that. That is still in the product. You can still utilize that today. That evolved into using the Excel financial reporting add-in. That's where we connect and we pull in data into Excel and we do the manipulation and get it in the format that we like, and then obviously try to protect the Excel spreadsheet and send that out to everyone. So what we're going to see today is when we go through and do the presentation, you're going to see a direct contrast from having to do a lot of that manipulation and trying to make sure you've always got the right lines of your financial statement or your chart of accounts in there. If you've added something new, how do I get my definition across my my product lines and my business units and the sites and the things like that, right? So CloudSuite Industrial and these other ERP platforms from Infor, they're all really good, but they're designed to be really solid manufacturing solutions. And then what I would call they have okay and good financials. Prophix now levels that up and gives you the capabilities for your finance, your FP&A teams to kind of rival the manufacturing capabilities. So financial reporting is one aspect. The next aspect is really around, okay, when we look at how we put out maybe a budget and a forecast or a plan, So in CloudSuite Industrial, for example, you're very limited of how you put in and you utilize what would I call the budget and plans in the application. You can really go in by account. You kind of have a date range or a period, and you have a budgeted change and a plan change. And a lot of companies will use that creatively to get the ability to bring in last year's actuals and things and the like, right? And really, this is how they manage that. It's in Excel. Then you basically go into Excel. You kind of put some drivers in there to maybe say, I'm going to do a 5% across the board uplift. And then that gets placed back into CloudSuite Industrial, and you run your Excel financials. And that's kind of the mode that people work in. So there again, you're utilizing those standard tools. They're basic financial tools, but they're not built to do any type of financial reforecasting based on scenarios and models, maybe sales models, maybe a forecast model in which we're going to open up and drive new business units and the like. They're really not built for that. And the whole concept of maybe doing a 3.9, that definitely doesn't exist within most of these applications. The last frontier is really around the companies that are here today that have complex environments like John mentioned earlier, to where maybe we have a US, a Canadian, EMEA, maybe Mexico and some other countries, to where now we're not only dealing with those sites independently, but this may be an scenario to where we're doing intercompany. We're selling to and from those individual companies, either at arm's length or within like transfer orders, having to eliminate intercompany pricing and activity, dealing with ownership percentages and the like. That's where, again, most basic ERP functionality gets only so far, and we used to have to put all that in Excel. This is where we're going to see how Prophix now allows these teams to set this up, manage it very easily, and then be able to work within these environments, both from a GAAP and an IFRS standpoint as well. Especially when you get to Europe, right? They're doing IFRS. Here in the States, we're doing GAAP. Those two worlds are quite different. There's only certain capabilities in CloudSuite Industrial that's going to allow you to effectively handle that. So just wanted to kind of highlight some areas that when we start to look at the contrast of what you can do in core functionality to what you can do within the CPM that Prophix provides, that's really the essence of what we hope to get the message across today, that teams, this is going to be a package that's kind of going to bring everything out of the box, that's going to cover from a solution perspective, dealing with your close and consolidations through your compliance, reporting and analytics, and the FP&A and the analysis. It's really all part of this solution. No more point solutions to bring in for different pieces. If we want to bring in more cash and treasury, those type things, right? You're really able to bring all this in. It can connect to multiple data sources. So don't be worried about that. If we need to connect to a TMS or need to connect to an HR solution to do, maybe workforce planning and budgeting, right? The beauty is this application is kind of your one-stop shop. We can utilize and run this within the latest tech platform within Infor OS, within Cloud Suites. So you really can have this as just part of your natural environment when you deploy your Cloud Suite. So with that, I'll turn it back over to John, see if he's got any questions, and we're going to show you some product.
No, you did a great job teeing that up, Ron. Thank you very much. And to your point, exactly from a solution standpoint, Prophix is a platform with really the 4 core products really geared towards solving different pain points and challenges. So for example, closing consolidations, we have our account reconciliation tool, intercompany management, along with financial consolidations. Under accounting and compliance, we have lease accounting. We have customers that use Prophix for disclosure management. And then native to the product since day one, which goes back 35 years, are really the reporting and analytics capabilities in the financial planning. So doing all of your planning, all of your reporting. Prophix is a modeling tool at the end of the day. So whether it be financial modeling, operational modeling, personnel modeling, SIOP modeling, that all can be handled directly within the solution. And at the beginning of the year, we actually released our latest application, which is our integrated business planning, which actually allows now Prophix to accommodate extremely large data sets and extremely complex calculations. So if you want to go ahead and plan down to the SKU level and you have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 different SKUs, you can absolutely go ahead and do so within Prophix as well. And then last point I make with respect to, having a tool on a platform is that logging into Prophix, you would do so through a common portal. You'd have access to all of your applications. Everything has the exact same look and feel. So it's not as if you have to go ahead and reinvent the wheel, relearn a new solution. It also speaks to the integration capability. So it's one integration rather than having a separate integration into, as Ron had mentioned, the point solutions. And then you're dealing with one vendor, one training academy to work with, and it just makes things a lot easier at the end of the day. From a security standpoint, security blankets the entire product, so users will only be able to see the information that their security permissions allows them to do so. All right, so without further ado, bear with me one sec. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my environment here. I'm just going to give it a sec. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag here. All right, so you guys should be able to see your screen change on your end. As mentioned, basically what I want to do for the next 30 minutes or so is really just give you a day in the life of a Prophix user. Prophix, as Rhonda mentioned, is a web-based tool. So in terms of gaining access, you could leverage any of your favorite web browsers. So Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, all pretty common ones. We do support single sign-on, which actually allows your users to pass through their login credential. Alternatively, if you don't use SSO within your organization, users could actually log in via username and password. Now, Prophix is also device agnostic, meaning you can actually go ahead and pull up Prophix on your smartphone, your laptop, your tablet. Once again, as long as you have that internet connection, you can actually gain access into the tool. If you go ahead and do pull it up on your smartphone, it is responsive to the landscape of your screen. Okay, now from the end user standpoint, each user may have a bit of a different experience with Prophix. And what I mean by that is that when we integrate into SyteLine, CloudSuite Industrial, XA, it's really up to them in terms of the data that they'd want to go ahead and pull into their dashboard. And I have a couple different flavors that I'm going to share with you. But if you take a look at the example that we have in front of us, you'll notice we could track revenue-related information. We could track specific KPIs as it pertains to, say, gross margin or CapEx budget. We could take a look at operating expenses. Scroll on down a bit. If you want to break down revenue or expenses by region, you can absolutely do so. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we're harnessing all that data that resides within your ERP system. Organizations may want to keep a close eye on their working cap or inventory turnover. At the end of the day, as long as we hook into it, we can actually pull that information into a model and then leverage it from a dashboarding standpoint to harness all those insights. Here's just an example of another dashboard that I've put together, which is more of that C-suite view. Once again, really just tracking specific data points that a CFO might want to be interested in. And then lastly, for organizations that need to keep a close eye on specific metrics and data points related to, financial ratios because they're PE backed, you can absolutely go ahead and create a dashboard to highlight that information. And the beauty, once again, is that security blankets the entire product, which means you could go ahead and create a couple of these different dashboards, roll them out across the entire organization, and users will only be able to basically view the information that their permissions allow them to do so. All right. From the end user standpoint, what people absolutely love about the Prophix dashboarding functionality is that it's fully interactive. We also do leverage off of AI functionality in the form of what we call chart insights. So if you go ahead and click on the little information icon, Prophix will provide you a brief description as to what's going on within that visual. But in addition to that, they're actually fully interactive and drillable. So for example, if we're taking a look at our operating expenses, we could see that we have some pressure coming from our operations group. What we can actually do is double click anywhere on this chart and Prophix will actually go ahead and drill down into that hierarchy. To provide everybody a little bit of context on today's call, the starting point for us when we go ahead and build a model within Prophix is we take a look at the hierarchies that are set up within your ERP system. And you could think of this as the hierarchies that relate to your org structure, your account structure. And that becomes the foundation of how we mirror that within Prophix, which then in turn provides this inherent capability to drill down into your data. So in our example, we can see majority of the pressures coming from our engineering team. What's pretty neat as a user, what you can do is actually right click, select a little link, and Prophix will go ahead and surface any type of report that's linked to that visual. From a reporting standpoint, any of the reports that you produce within Prophix can be formatted in a number of different ways. So as you can see, you can include logos, charts, graphs. Reports can include a section for commentary as well. The benefit, and this goes back to what Ron had mentioned before, is the fact that reporting is dynamic within Prophix. So when you go ahead and essentially create the format or the structure of the report, it can be leveraged across the entire organization. In my example, if we come over to the left-hand side here, you'll notice we have these pick lists that I could come in, select another department. I could select another month. And as I go ahead and do so, Prophix will render the data that's associated with my selection here. If you have a multi-entity structure, you may have another dropdown for your entities as well. But the beauty being is that you don't have to go ahead and consistently go ahead and format reports on a monthly or weekly basis. And by allowing us to tap into, SyteLine, XA, CloudSuite Industrial, we would go ahead and set up the integration, schedule the cadence of that, and essentially what you'd be able to do is take a look at your most up-to-date and relevant information on whatever frequency or cadence that you would need to. In the event that you ever want to export data out of Prophix, we make it extremely easy and intuitive. As you can see, there's a file dropdown. You would select your preferred format. In this case, there's essentially 48 different reports that can be exported out of Prophix. And the reason being is we have a report for every department and time combination. So we could select them all. We could select the current page. We could remove pages with no data. Or if we want to come in, we can actually cherry pick them as well. And once again, Prophix will go ahead and push it out to that specified format. You could go ahead and attach that to an email and fire it off to the individual that needs that information. The benefit of actually having users set up within Prophix is that Prophix applies their respective security permissions to once again limit what they have the ability to view. So keep in mind, reporting is dynamic. If you ever go ahead and add a new account or new cost center, a new department within your organization, you don't have to ever worry about going ahead and creating a new report. The report is dynamic. It'll actually go ahead and pick that up, and once again, go ahead and display the results. Obviously, within the reports, you can see you can include conditional formatting to highlight exceptions. What's pretty cool is that if you want to further analyze your data, you can always right-click, select Analyze, and Prophix will bring you into what we call ad hoc analysis here. So the best way to describe ad hoc is that it's similar to that of a pivot table. However, your end users will never have to worry about extracting data sets out of their ERP system. They won't have to worry about, overlaying a pivot table, running a VLOOKUP, or creating any sort of formulas. In this case, if we want to drill down into our travel variance, we could simply hit this little plus icon. Once again, Prophix is going to drill down into their account hierarchy. So in this case, we can see majority of the pressure is coming from our airfare account. As an analyst, their next question might be, what department, what cost center, what entity is driving this variance? And what's really powerful is the fact that they could come over here to the left-hand side, grab the department dimensions, drop it within the canvas, and Prophix will essentially go ahead and swap the two out. Okay, let's say we want to take a look at our actuals where they're broken down to the monthly level. We could come in, grab months, drop it within our columns here, and once again, Prophix will swap the two out. You could always leverage the dropdowns as pick lists as well. So here we could come in, select, any of the members within the dropdown. The one thing I do want to highlight here is the fact that there's no formulas or calculations that reside within Prophix's screens. And the fact is that, once again, we're taking a look at the hierarchies to automatically summarize and sum up your information. So once again, no formulas, nothing like that. And also this speaks to the idea of one central source of truth as well, which is something a lot of organizations struggle with if they're managing the reporting and analytics within the Excel environment. So in this case, if you want to go ahead and slice and dice your data, you could pivot on the data. You could create exceptions to highlight conditions, right? If people prefer to have the rows and columns swapped, they could easily go into the actions option and go ahead and make that selection. And then they could always toggle back. Okay, super, super easy, super intuitive. Everything that you can see that I'm doing is all done via point, click, drag, drop, and all I'm doing is utilizing my mouse to navigate Prophix here. The one other thing that I want to point out is the fact that we have the ability to drill across to the underlying transactions. So let's say I'm analyzing my data here, and I could see that we have a variance coming from our engineering group. What we have the ability to do is actually go ahead, right-click, select drill across, and Prophix will surface the underlying transactions that actually make up that balance. So once again, we pull in the transactional level data from your ERP system into a staging database within Prophix. And then we can actually go ahead and work with you to identify what information you want to bring into the drill across. So the account, department, month, the value, obviously, we could filter on this. And if you store any type of images, and think of this as invoices, receipts, purchase orders, Within a system that's able to generate the URL, we can actually include the hyperlink within the drill across to allow you to get down to that level of detail without ever leaving Prophix. In summary, really what we're trying to do is provide end users with a guided approach to allowing them to analyze their own data. Once again, they log into Prophix, they have a dashboard tracking information that's relative to their particular role within the company. They could drill up, they could drill down, they could link off into specific reports. And it's really a nice means of them allowing them to be able to analyze and answer their own questions rather than having to go ahead and reach out to the accounting and finance team. So closing out of both of these screens here. For those that are really in tune with their data, and if they're logging in and they notice a variance right off of their dashboard, what's really powerful is that they could be a single click way of surfacing the transactional level data. Once again, we could filter on this. And, within 2 seconds, we could see that, there's an invoice that pertains to travel in this example that either was an expense that we didn't budget for, or it may have been reclassed and, booked to the wrong period. So really, really, once again, easy way to leverage and harness the data within your ERP system to provide those easy insights. And then real quick, just on the reporting side, before we switch gears and get to the planning side of things, is that you can actually leverage Prophix to do all of your reporting as well. So think of this as the financial statement, so balance sheet, P&L, cash flow statement, and variance type of reporting. Here's one report that I put together not too long ago that a lot of people seem to really like. It's a nice summary, which I call the integrated financial statements, where you notice we have a snapshot of our balance sheet, cash flow, P&L. We can roll up the net income into our cash flow statement and then take into consideration items from our balance sheet to model out cash from operations, investments, financing, and essentially come up with our end of period cash balance. Great from a summary standpoint. For those that love the details, what's really neat, once again, they could right click, select link template, and the detailed report actually lives right behind it. And keep in mind, we know that a lot of organizations like to do reporting on actuals versus budget, or they want to go ahead and create a budget scenario or forecast scenario. What's nice is that detail can all reside within Prophix now. Here's an example of a balance sheet, right? If I scroll down, we could play around with different drivers and model out different assumptions as it relates to days in inventory, DPO, DSO, and once again, come up with a budgeted version or a forecast version. For those of you on today's call, last thing that I want to point out here with respect to the reporting functionality is that if you have to go ahead and create a results package or a board deck, what's nice is that within Prophix, you can go ahead and create the individual report. You can actually stitch them together in what we call report binders here. And what's nice is that if you have reports that reside within a different format, such as Word, PDF, PowerPoint, Excel, that you want to include as part of this package, you can easily go ahead, hit the little plus icon, find where you have it saved and add it. To the right of that is our distribution list. So we could come in, we could select individuals, we could select groups, hit OK, and they would automatically become part of this distribution list now. So this is great for organizations. Once again, let's say this is a flash report that you want to send out every Monday morning at 8 a.m. This would be sitting in everybody's inbox. What's actually really powerful is that Prophix goes to the extent of parsing out the content within the report binder based on the user security permissions to ensure that they only receive the information that they're supposed to see. All right, switching gears here. Let's jump back out to my dashboard. Let's talk about the planning capability within Prophix. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and on the left-hand side here, you'll notice a section called My Tasks. This represents a workflow within Prophix. So some users within your organization may go ahead and launch into their dashboard and only have 1 or 2 tasks. Some may have a handful. It really depends in terms of how involved they are with the overall process. What's really neat is that if they hit this little rocket ship, they could take a look at what they currently have on the go. Anything that they miss will show up within the overdue section. And as they go ahead and complete items, they'll actually show up within the completed area here as well. So it really becomes that one stop for them. They would simply click on the task, and Prophix will go ahead and pull up the template that they're required to fill out. All right, look and feel, once again, is totally up to the organization. When it comes to OpEx planning, a lot of organizations tend to plan where they have their accounts within the rows, the time within the columns. What's really powerful from Prophix's standpoint is that we could go down to any granularity. So we have customers that plan and budget at the daily level, some plan at the weekly. Most common is monthly, but you could plan at the quarterly, semi-annual, or annual level. And once again, the look and feel of the template is totally up to them. Scrolling over, you'll notice that I could go ahead and include additional columns. Let's say we want to go ahead and plan, a couple years out. We want to pull in our prior year actuals and maybe our 9+3 forecast as a jump off point. All that data, since it resides within Prophix, can easily be put into a template. And then from an input standpoint, it's really, really simplistic. Users could come in, enter in values directly into the cells. Prophix will go ahead and recalculate the annual totals along with the subtotals as well. For users that may want to go ahead and adjust data, let's say they want to go ahead and select maybe 3 months worth of office expenses. They can actually go ahead and make that selection, select adjust data, and you'll notice that there's a prompt that'll appear asking them how they like to do so. They could come in, either adjust by percentages or by absolute amounts, simply hit OK, and once again, Prophix is going to go ahead and update that template for them. Then real quickly, one last thing that I want to point out here with respect to the inputs is, let's say you have a budget manager that's not too concerned about profiling at the monthly level. They know that they're going to go ahead and incur $100K in office expenses for the upcoming year. They could enter in that one value, and Prophix is smart enough to realize that they've entered it into an annual column, and I'll actually ask them how they want to push it down to the monthly level. The first two defaults are pretty self-explanatory: spread evenly. I'll go ahead and take it and basically break it evenly across the 12 periods. Second option, within Prophix, there's a large copy and paste feature, which allows you to roll over your prior year budget or your September outlook as a starting point, in which case Prophix will respect the seasonality that's in that template and update it proportionally based on that new input. Okay. Where Prophix gets really powerful is that we can actually go into the show more section here. And this is where users can actually come up with their own spread method on the fly. So for example, let's say we may want our expense to reflect that of our revenue. You could come in, select a particular revenue account, and have Prophix spread the data based on that seasonality. Maybe it's similar to that of another one of our expense accounts. Better yet, what's nice about Prophix, as I mentioned before, is that it's a modeling tool. So you can actually pull in statistical data where you may want to base it off of your FT, your headcount, your square footage, claims, retention, number of units produced. All this data can actually now reside within Prophix, and you could leverage it for KPI purposes or spreading in this case. So you could come in, select an account. You could base it off of the seasonality that's maybe associated with your actuals version, right? And then you could even leverage time. So let's say you anticipate, the expense similar to that of a previous year. You could come in, select, a particular year, particular version, particular account, and on the fly actually come up with your own spread logic. This is one thing that I would say is very, very different than any sort of Excel solution that's out there, which tends to have spreading functionality. But the way you would actually have to go ahead and set that up is by linking all those different cells to go ahead and spread the data. This is an inherent capability that is native to the product, and really all it's doing at the end of the day is taking a look at the underlying dimensionality within the tool. So nothing that needs to be programmed, coded, or anything like that. So my example, if I go ahead and select our second option here, Prophix will go ahead and update it accordingly. Making our way up this template, if we turn our attention to the advertising account, for some items, you may want your end users to provide you additional details. And in this case, you'll notice that there's little blue triangles in the lower right-hand corner. And what that signifies is that I can't just enter in a value directly into that cell. You'll notice that there's this prompt that'll appear. I would simply hit OK. And now you can actually force your end users to provide you with a description, justification. There's even a section for additional commentary as well. You can make this mandatory for some, optional for others. It's really up to you in terms of where you want to go ahead and turn this on and off. Okay. And then making our way to the top section, the payroll section here, you notice that it's actually blank. What we're going to do now is go back out to my workflow. I'm going to go ahead and click on my personnel planning task. And this is what's great about Prophix, is that we are system agnostic, meaning we can actually go ahead and tap into not only your ERP systems, but you may have a payroll system, an HR system, a CRM system. As long as we have access to the data at the end of the day, we can actually pull that into a model within Prophix to provide, once again, the reporting and planning functionality. So in this example, if your organization utilizes ADP, Paylocity, Ultipro, for example, we can harness all that information, pull it into a personnel model, and then go ahead and build a schedule similar to the one that I have here. So you'll notice I pulled in the ID, the name of the individual, their hire date, end date, the entity that they roll up to, department, and then we get into all their payroll related attributes as well. Okay. Scrolling over to the right, we have a number of different items that we're planning for. So in my example, we're planning earnings, benefits, taxes, increases. If I go ahead and hit the little plus icon, you'll notice that it'll go ahead and expand on it. Prophix can take into consideration any type of payroll your organization cycle, any type of payroll cycle your organization may be on. So some of our customers are on weekly, some are on semi-monthly, some are on a 544 calendar, some are on a combination of both. Prophix can take that into account from a planning standpoint. And really, the nice part at the end of the day is that you have the ability to pull in all your personnel information into one central location. If you need adjustments to apply across everybody within the organization, you can actually have it done at the macro level. If you want to make an adjustment at the individual level, you can actually simply right-click, select Edit Employee Member. Prophix will pull up their own individual details, and this is where you could come in and make your changes. So, for example, if somebody gets promoted, you could change their title. You could adjust their compensation. For those organizations on today's call that, offer benefits, whether it be 401k, health, dental, vision, all that can be taken into account within Prophix. A lot of our customers are also, dispersed across different geographic locations. There's obviously different tax rates that are associated with different states, provinces, countries. That all can be taken into consideration within Prophix as well. And then before we wrap up here on the personnel side, you may have individuals that work within different departments where their time needs to be allocated accordingly from a budgeting standpoint. What's really nice is that there's this allocations tab. You could come in now, base it off of a percentage, allocate an individual's time across different cost centers, departments, projects. And if it's only for a duration of time, so think of this as a maternity leave coverage or somebody that's covering maybe because somebody's off on LTD, you can actually set the start and end date, and Prophix will take that into account. And then, if somebody's going to be promoted throughout the year and you want to plan for that accordingly, you could obviously go ahead and set up various types of actions to accommodate that as well. So long story short here, you really have one area where you can come in, you can add people, you can remove people, you could update any of their payroll related details. This is all part of the workflow. So let's say I'm responsible for the first pass here. Ron might be my approver. I could go ahead and submit it. He would receive an email notification with a link to this template. He then could go ahead, approve, reject. We could even pass back and forth commentary between us as well. And then once we're satisfied, all we do is hit the little update icon, and Prophix will then go ahead and push this information now back into our financial model. So we can come back out to our OPEX template here, hit the little refresh icon, and just like that, now you'll notice the payroll appears in its respective GL accounts. All right. Last point that I want to point out here is really nice from an aggregation standpoint. There's no more linking of tabs, spreadsheets, workbooks. There's no manual process you need to run anymore. If I go ahead and select our operations group, it's going to go ahead and roll up the values from our engineering, manufacturing, maintenance teams all into that one nice consolidated view for us here. If we ever want to do a top level adjustment, let's say we anticipated, office expenses being $50,000 across those three different teams, we could come into that consolidated template. Prophix is smart enough to realize that we're entering in a value into that consolidated input template, and it'll ask us how we want to go ahead and push it back down. So once again, all the exact same spread methods we mentioned before are available. In my example, if we take 50 and divide it by 3, we should now see about 16K sitting in office expenses for each one of our departments. And from an auditability standpoint, if we ever want to take a look at the data history and how a value changed down to the cell level, a user can actually right-click, select data history, and Prophix will pull up this log where it tracks the user ID, date and time, name of the individual, how the value changed. And if you actually go ahead and spread data, it actually tells you the spread logic that was utilized as well. All right. And then from the versioning standpoint, we know it's never one and done. You could actually go ahead and create and store as many different versions within Prophix as well. So closing out of there real quick. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about forecast or reforecast, as some call it. And essentially a reforecast within Prophix is another version where all you're doing is combining your actual data, which is being fed into Prophix from CloudSuite Industrial, SyteLine, XA. Your actuals are locked down. Users can't make any changes or edits. You never want people to touch your actuals. But where they would be able to go ahead and reforecast is where I have the cell shaded in this lighter color blue. They could come in, enter in new values. They could adjust data in bulk if they want to, or they could even go ahead and do those top level spreads as well. So the exact same functionality that's available on the budget input is also available on forecast templates. For those that want to go ahead and model out different assumptions, you may want to go ahead and create version 2, version 3. What's pretty powerful, and probably the one feature that a lot of our customers have been leveraging over the past couple months and weeks, is the ability to go ahead and run what-if scenarios within Prophix. And what is exceptionally nice is the fact that we make it extremely intuitive for users to be able to go ahead and create these different scenarios. In our example today, let's go ahead and say we want to create V2 where we're going to go ahead and increase OPEX across all of our accounts by 3%. And then V3, we're going to be a little bit more optimistic and decrease it by 5%, let's say. To set this up extremely easy, users will go ahead and select the version that they want to go ahead and utilize as a starting point. So let's say we created the version 1 or 3+9. We want to go ahead and update version 2. They would come into the common dimensions, and let's say we want to have all of our P&L accounts updated by 3% in this case. You know, if it's only a subset of accounts, they could come in. This would be obviously the customer's chart of accounts here. You could select a group of accounts. You could select the single account. You could select them all like I did. And then you would actually come in and select the departments or cost centers that you want to have this applicable to. Once again, I've selected them all, but you could select a group. You could select one. That is totally up to you. And then lastly, data transformation. This is where you're telling Prophix how you want to go ahead and adjust the data. We could increase or decrease by percentages. We could do absolute amounts. You could even multiply and divide your data as well. So as I was walking you through that, I hit the little run button and Prophix ran the process. So if we go back out, just like that now, if I go ahead and select version 2 on the fly within less than 60 seconds, as you see, we could go ahead and create a new scenario. So this is great for those that want to model out, you know, impacts to certain lines of business, certain fluctuations. And then best part, if you ever want to compare and contrast those different versions, you always have the ability to right click, select analyze. Prophix strips away the formatting of the report and brings you into ad hoc here. And this is where if we want to stack our different versions side by side, you could absolutely do so. Let's say we want to bring in our original budget. Just like that, now you can compare and contrast those 3 versions directly within Prophix. All right, so we spent a little bit of time, you know, talking about OPEX personnel. A lot of our customers leverage Prophix for CapEx planning, inventory planning. Just on the sales side of things, I want to show you a couple different examples. And this is within the FP&A Plus, the advanced modeling capability. As I mentioned before, it's Prophix's latest application that we released at the beginning of the year. We're super excited about it because it's a real game changer for organizations that have large data sets, complex calculations. It's really the only solution within the mid-market that has the ability to accommodate that without having any performance issues. So here's just an example of a template that I put together where we can actually go ahead and plan down to the customer level. If your customers roll up into a region, we could take that into account. But in my template here, you notice that we could plan by our different products or product lines if you choose to. This could be SKUs. And really what we're doing at the end of the day is taking into consideration volume and rate to come up with product revenue. And as you can see in my example, I have quite a few within this template. Once you have all that information now within Prophix, once again, you can do all of your reporting on the sales and revenue side of things as well. So if you want to go ahead and produce reports where you're taking a look at gross margin by customer, once again, you'll notice that my little scroll bar is extremely tiny here. And this just goes to show the amount of data that I pulled in. I think I have over 100,000 SKUs and customers within this example here. Once again, we have our drop downs for different products. And then once again, you may want to slice and dice your data in a number of different ways. So if you want to take a look at product revenue by customers, as long as you pull that data into Prophix, you can actually go ahead and create any type of report. You could harness that data within, the dashboard, for example. But it really brings everything to the forefront, allowing you to actually be more proactive than reactive at the end of the day. All right. I believe we're almost at time here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint. Ron, is there anything that you want to go ahead and add to what was just mentioned, and maybe see if there's any questions that came in that we can go ahead and address?
No, I think that was excellent, John. Let's see what we've got for Q&A, and we'll wrap up.
Awesome. Sandy, are there any questions that came in?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and just take a couple of these questions. So one that we have is, how long does a typical implementation take, John?
Yeah, that's a great question. The nice thing about a Prophix implementation is that we talk in terms of days rather than months. A typical Prophix implementation really ranges anywhere between 25 to 30 days. And we obviously break those out over the course of a couple of weeks. So a project typically runs anywhere between 6 to 10 weeks. We work around our customer's schedule. Obviously, we need to take into consideration blackout dates and vacations and stuff like that. But the nice part being, it's not like an ERP implementation where it's months. It's rather short in duration. And a lot of times we could do different components concurrently.
Great. Thank you, John. So I guess another question kind of coming in here is something to consider. Besides ERP, can Prophix integrate kind of with other source systems? So what would you say would be other kind of key systems that you've seen people integrate with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the big benefits of Prophix is integration capability. We're system agnostic. So not only can we integrate to your ERP, but a lot of our customers pull in data that resides within their CRM systems, such as Salesforce, for example. Payroll is another pretty big one where people leverage the data that resides within ADP, Paylocity, AltiPro. And really what's nice is it allows you to bring all that information into a central location rather than having it reside in, different source systems and different reports and different Excel workbooks. Now everything is in one central location, and it really gives organizations a holistic view of the entire company.
Right. We have a comment, just Prophix looks easy to use, but they did ask, does someone need to be like a super user of Excel to be good at Prophix?
No, that's a great question. No, the answer to that is absolutely not, because as you can see, everything that you would do within Prophix from the end user, even admin standpoint, is all through point, click, drag, drop, or nice GUI interfaces. There's nothing technical about the product at the end of the day. And that really speaks to the reason why Prophix has such high user adoption. What we find is that usually it's a tool that's geared towards, the finance and accounting team. But it tends to get then rolled out across the entire organization where, companies go ahead and roll it out to their operations group where they have somebody on the operations team now that logs into Prophix, that opens up a dashboard that has their specific KPIs, that has reports that they would need to consume really at their fingertips at the end of the day, but nothing technical. And the way you would go ahead and create the reports essentially within Prophix is through our template studio, which is an exact replica of Excel. So that lends itself to being able to be, implemented and deployed really, really quickly.
Great. And thank you, Ron, for answering those kind of very specific questions, speaking to Infor OS in the chat. So I really appreciate it, Ron. I don't see any more questions coming in at this time. Oh, we got one more. So if cloud, where does Prophix extract data from?
Yeah, so depending upon where the data resides, in some cases, if it is cloud-based, we typically would connect via API. Usually we don't touch the production environment. We're hitting a data lake in order to go ahead and pull that information in. In some cases, if it's an on-prem solution, it'd be done through ODBC or even flat file. We can actually automate a flat file integration where Prophix could go out to an SFTP site, take a look if there's a file that's waiting for it, and actually import that data. And that can all be scheduled as well. So